All right, well, welcome to everybody again for joining us for another one of our compliance chats. Today, we're going to be focusing on what resources you may need, when is it appropriate to engage different types of resources, both for private citizens, also obviously as business owners. My name is Kathleen. I'm the head of marketing here at Bravo Store Systems. Real quick, for those of you who may not be familiar with Bravo, we are an all-in-one point of sale software for gun retailers and a lot of other industries, but today we'll be focusing on, obviously, those of you who have an FFL. So you can see on the screen here, Bravo does everything from the point of sale and inventory management, end-to-end gun transactions and transfers, integrations with vendor catalogs. So no third-party software integrations you're dealing with. If you're interested in learning more about Bravo, put your name in the chat and we're happy to reach out to you. But the real star of the show and of all of our compliance chats is Rick Vasquez. Welcome, Rick. Thanks again for being here.
It is always my pleasure, Kathleen.
Good. Well, Bravo and Rick entered into a partnership a couple of months ago, and we did that because for Bravo, although we know, right, a key component of running your FFL operation is having reliable, stable, and compliant software, which we offer, there's so many other services that business operators and FFLs need that Bravo doesn't provide as a software provider. And so we entered into partnership with Rick, who's the founder of Rick Vasquez Firearms. You can see some of his credentials up on the screen, although there's a lot more of them. But Rick's depth and breadth of experience in this industry is very impressive, and somebody who we trust to recommend our customers, or even if you're not a customer, you have access to Rick and his team. And here are the number of services that Rick offers, from firearms training and shooting courses for all levels of shooters, gunsmithing and repairs, but a lot of consultation as well. And so we know that's where a lot of our customers have leaned in. I think this topic today that we're going to be covering, right? What resources do you need? When do you engage a consultant? Why would you engage that? And then, does there come a point where you need an attorney involved, is more relevant than ever. The ATF published just in May, there were 800 inspections done, 25 warnings, and 17 revocations. We know since the zero tolerance policy was passed, there's more and more pressure on business operators to be doing things right. And Rick, you know more than anybody that regulations are changing all the time. And so does Bravo, because we're constantly changing the software to be compliant with the ATF regs. So I'm excited for you to provide some guidance for everybody about the questions, the key questions and top questions that I think you get asked. So Rick's going to go through these. We'll go through these slides. But for those of you who are watching, if any questions come up, drop those in the chat and we'll get those answered. We'll also have time at the end for open Q&A. All right. So Rick, talk to us about a firearms consultant, a compliance consultant. What are they?
That sounds great. What is a firearms consultant? I'm not going to basically, say who out there is not a consultant, but I want to talk to you about the qualifications. And if you're hiring a consultant who's only worked in the firearms industry, then that person knows that industry. He worked for a big box store. He knows how to do a lot of logistical work. He knows the basic functions of the A&D, but he's probably never done a 4473. He's never done a NICS check, never done a PICS check. That's Pennsylvania or whatever the state requires. So you want to find a consultant, and of course I'll point to myself, that has a lot of ATF experience, whether he was in the firearms industry and on their own, he went out and he or she went out and learned all these different regulations that pertain to keeping your firearms license. And that's what this is all about. Yeah. So the consultant should know basically what is involved in your actual procedures of how you run your business from A to Z. He should recommend that you get a standard operating procedure in place. And I'm going to ask this question. I always ask this question. I was on with Hank Strange last night, and we really called out Bravo Store Systems really good. Is who in the firearms industry in the last few years has printed off and looked at the firearms regulation guide, the P5300.4. It used to be given out automatically every year with updates, and ATF quit printing it in about 2000, I think 2014 was the last time it was printed. So when you got your introduction to your getting your license, getting your inspection to get to sign for your license, you would get the P5300.4, the firearms ammunition regulation guide, and it would give you a start of where to look up things. And they had a phenomenal question and answer session in the back of the book. It would answer a lot of your questions. And what's important about that is when you sign for your license, you signed to ATF that you understood all of the regulations and statutes that they covered with you in that 1 hour to 4 hour block that they spent with you. And you may not be aware of that, but ATF puts that on file with your license. So you signed your name that says, I understand everything I need to do to be compliant with ATF regulations. So I'm going to leave that set with you and let you think about that for a while, because we're talking about what is a consultant. So the consultant is a person that can come in and show you how to go through from the beginning, the acquisition of the firearms, the disposition of your firearms. What are the actual categories of your firearms? I have seen A&D books where people put lever action, bolt action, semi-automatic. But if you look at the back of the 4473, there's only so many categories of firearms: rifle, pistol, you have the NFA, you have other, and you have firearm, and you have shotgun. There's nothing there that says lever action, semi-automatic. But if you start out by yourself and you don't have anybody tells you exactly what goes in those categories, you fill it out. You pick this up. It's a Winchester Model 94, and you write lever action down. It's a bolt action rifle, and you write bolt action. You have to go with the categories. Also, now if you're a manufacturer or an importer, the A&D book has changed completely, and a lot of people don't know that. There's categories that have been added with the new framer receiver rule, and they were added because of the homemade firearm, the ghost gun, that evil ghost gun that everybody's making out there. So you have to have a category in there for the homemade. What's the category? I can't remember the acronym. I'll just say homemade firearms. Now, what ATF says is you can continue to use the A&D book that you're using today till it runs out. Then you have to implement it. I tell everybody you need to implement it now. Don't give anybody a reason to look further into what you're doing. Do everything correctly. So whether you're doing it electronically, that's easy. Bravo just sets you up and changes your A&D book, and it has the new category once you become a manufacturer or an importer. But if you're doing a paper book, you need to close that book out and start a new book with the new categories in it. And I'll hit on this real quickly. If your sales are increasing and you're doing a robust business, you should be electronic already anyway, for the simple reason that it helps you so much with the compliance aspect of what you're doing with buying and selling firearms. So if you're not just the mom and pop guy who sells, 10, 20 firearms a year, you need to be on an electronic system now. I mean, that's just a way of the future. It's neater, it's cleaner. This system that Bravo sells has been documented with all the correct entries, so you can't make mistakes. And then that way, if you get inspected, everything is correct. And that's what happens during inspection. So that's kind of what a compliance consultant is. He's the person, or she's the person you can pick up the phone and say, Rick, I just got in a a Kalashnikov, a pistol grip shotgun. How do I write that up? What is a pistol grip shotgun? And this is a category that I just saw. One of these gentlemen on YouTube, I was just looking something up, and I just saw, he goes, why does ATF not call this a pistol? And that is a very important question he asked, because firearms are classified in accordance with the definitions in 478.11. So ATF looks at the definitions and says, this is a pistol. It's designed to be fired with one hand. If it's a revolver, it's got a revolving cylinder. If it's a semi-automatic, it has a breech perpendicular to the bore. But one thing to remember, and we're kind of getting to the weeds now, but I want to tell you this because your consultant should know this and they don't know this. Anything above 50 caliber is considered non-sporting except sporting shotguns. And a sporting shotgun can be 12 gauge, 10 gauge, but sporting shotguns are waived from the definition of destructive device if they're considered sporting. So this pistol grip device that you're shooting, it can't be a shotgun because it's not designed to be fired from the shoulder. And it can't be a handgun because it would be considered a destructive device with a bore diameter larger than 50 caliber. So what is it? It's a pistol grip firearm designed to fire shotgun ammunition. So how do you log this in? You log it in as a PGF or pistol grip firearm. And those acronyms are actually in your A&D book, and they're not in your A&D book, on the back of your 4473. And the PGF was addressed in the 2012 ATF newsletter that came out. And those things should all be saved by you, and your consultant, if you're using one, should be telling you to save these. So when you have a question, you open up your binder and your SOP and say, okay, where's my category of firearms? I need to know what this is called. And if you don't have that, then you pick up the phone and call your consultant, and he can tell you, oh yeah, that was addressed in the 2012 newsletter. And here's a copy of a letter that I received from ATF. And this is how you log that firearm in correctly. So that is a very valuable resource to have as a consultant. Any questions on that?
Well, I look at like the wealth of knowledge you're bringing in, just even in this brief discussion. Do you find, I mean, you've worked with hundreds and hundreds of clients. Do you find that people tend to call you when the ATF's at their door, or it's like too late? Hey, we didn't know what we didn't know. Do you find that more and more FFLs now, knowing with the zero tolerance policy and revocations going up, you have more people saying, hey, would you just come in and check out and see if there's something we're doing wrong before the ATF's the one to point it out?
I had to laugh because that literally occurs very frequently. It occurs when ATF, so many of these field offices are doing a good thing. They'll call you the day before generally, and they're not doing it to be nice, but they don't want to waste their time. What if you're on vacation and your door is shut for 2 weeks and they show up and they got 3-4 man team? They just wasted their entire 8-hour day of all these people because they put a plan in place. So I get calls literally the day before an inspection show. Hey, can you be here? No, I can't be there, guys. I mean, what's the matter? Well, ATF is showing up and we're not sure we got everything in order. If you're making that phone call, it's too late. You have what you have right there. You cannot fabricate an A&D book. You cannot fabricate your NFA forms. There's nothing you can fabricate in that night. You have what you have. And then the next call is, hey, ATF came in, they went through all of my records, and I've got a bunch of violations. Well, before I wouldn't ask the question, what are the violations? Because you would generally get a warning conference, and unless it was, you were trafficking firearms or doing something grievously wrong, you would get a warning conference. They'd call you in, they'd scare you, tell you need to get this in order. What do you plan on doing about it? And they'd hire me as a consultant. I'd put a plan together. and then inspect them on a quarterly basis for about a year. And then ATF comes in, everything's still good to go. But now some of these violations go directly to revocation. I mean, it is automatically going directly to revocation. There's one field office that I was involved with. When these new rules came out, they actually went to last year's inspection where they had given the gentleman a warning about what he had done wrong and revoked his license based on last year's inspection, because this new guidance gave him the authority to do that. So that's a very good question. What you need to do, if you never hire a consultant, if you're going to do everything on your own, you need to study the firearms regulation guide. You need to save all your rulings. And when I say do an audit, I don't mean go in there and say, okay, I got gun number 1 and here's its entry. I got gun number 2 and here's its entry. You need to pull up the A&D book, the 4473, the form, and everything that goes along. You need to do a reconciliation. That's totally different than an audit. An audit is an accounting term, and you're matching 1 to 1, 2 to 2. Reconciliation is you're making sure that 4473 was signed, because that comes up. That's one of the biggest things. When you finalize the sale, you get so excited that money's going into cash register and you forget to get the final signature. It happens so often, it's unbelievable. You forget to get the identification number. You forget to write down the NICS number. So all of those things materialize, because if there's no NICS number, what do you think the first thing ATF is going to say? Did you run a NICS check? Yeah, I know I did. So now you're going to be jumping through the hoops, trying to call NICS, see if they can find where you did a NICS check on this date. But if you do a reconciliation and you're not sure that if you ran a NICS check or not, you can call that customer and say, I need you to bring that firearm back in. And I need you to come in here. I cannot tell them the reason. I'm going to resell that gun to you and do another background check. Do you still have a problem? Yes, you do. But at least you showed that you took the effort to correct it. And you proved that he was qualified to purchase that firearm. But when you have no NICS check on there, that is an automatic revocation if they prove you did not run a NICS check on that person that you sold to.
Well,
So
I think this is why you see, I mean, I know it seems a bit self-promotional because we know Bravo's point of sale has the 4473s and cloud storage and everything built in, but this is why, I mean, this is why people are calling us more, is they're saying, hey, even if I'm not a mass, seller or mass retailer of guns, it doesn't take much, right, to have your license pulled now. And that's the beauty of technology, is to say, hey, we can, you aren't going to forget signatures and stuff. The system literally helps you prevent those. But with respect to bringing in a compliance consultant, do you feel with the shift in the market now, greater, quite frankly, pressure and liability on the FFLs, are you seeing more people come to you as a kind of a proactive measure to have you come in and assess how they're doing things, as opposed to a reactive measure when the ATF's at their door?
It hasn't increased that much yet, but you can tell this is bringing a lot of attention 2 ways. If you just go on YouTube on any day and look for attorneys that have their little blog and talk about it. I mean, they're springing up like wildflowers. There's so many attorneys online on YouTube, and I don't want to call out anybody's name, but there are so many online now talking about all the new issues. And why do you think they're doing that? They're doing that to, of course, to increase their business and try to bring you into their fold so they can be your compliance expert. But a compliance expert and a gun attorney and an attorney are 3 different things. There's many gun attorneys, and I work for several gun attorneys. I just did a deposition on behalf of Polymer 80. Of course, they just this week they agreed to a settlement in California but I was working with their attorney to fight the frivolous lawsuits of the LA County against Polymer 80. So the gun attorney who's doing guns knows when he needs to bring in a consultant, because he may know all the gun law, but he doesn't have the past experience
Mhm.
and doesn't have the real hands-on knowledge of doing the compliance and the regulations pertaining to manufacturing and what is a receiver, what is not a receiver, what is a short barrel rifle, what is not a short barrel rifle. So a consultant is different than an attorney. There are gun attorneys, and then I always use this saying, if I'm going to go through a divorce, I'm not going to go hire my best friend who's a gun attorney. I'm going to go hire a divorce attorney, vice versa. If you see a lot of these attorneys, because they have big names being hired, and you spend a lot of money and it doesn't result in anything, because you still lose your license. So it's best to mitigate everything at the forefront. I am so glad you jumped in on the Bravo store systems. She's exactly right. If you got a system that aids you from not filling out something that's incomplete, that keeps you from doing something wrong, then it's going to benefit you so much. You're going to stay in business, basically. And if you don't know now, the goal of this administration, and they verbally said it, is to shut down gun dealers. So that's where we're heading today.
Mm-hmm. And I think I know we'll go back to the manufacturing consultant, but since we're touching on attorneys, I just moved ahead. But we can see here, right? So we'll draw a distinction. Rick, you are not the attorney, right? We can see
That
from
is
this
correct.
slide. Okay. However, right, you're going to do everything you can to help people say, hey, let's get you to the point you don't need one. However, when people do, I know in past conversations you've said, really great, not just attorneys, but firearm regulations attorneys that you can recommend. So this would be, if anybody out there is listening and you're not sure if you need an attorney, or you need one, but you want to make sure you're going with somebody reputable, I'd call up Rick and he can help make that recommendation and guide you through that.
Correct. And when I work for a person, I tell them when they need an attorney right away. I tell them that we can get you in order, and I will get you in order to ensure that you're not going to be entrapped by something. Now, when I walk out the door, if you don't do what you're supposed to do, there's nothing I can do about that. Or Kathleen sets you up all this great equipment, and you don't use it properly, it doesn't do you any good. If you're in the gun industry today, the paperwork portion of the business has gotten so crucial, it is unbelievable.
Mhm.
Everybody wants to make money, but you want to make money forever. So you have to worry about the paperwork portion of the business just as much as making the money part.
Mhm. All right, I'm going to skip back because I know you wanted to talk about, you work with a lot of manufacturers and do a lot of consulting. So talk through, for those of you who are listening and need a consultant, you're in manufacturing, talk us through kind of these key, 3 key roles that you would play as a manufacturing consultant, or guide someone to know if they need one.
Well, first of all, I'm going to tell you right now, the majority of the people that we deal with in the industry, and that's as a type 7 licensee. And now I'm going to eliminate the big companies, SIG, Colt, Smith & Wesson. Those are true manufacturers. They take a chunk of metal and they start from scratch and they make a firearm. So there's nothing in the regulations that kind of trips them up. They know when they have to serialize their firearm. They know when it has to be recorded. But the type 7 manufacturer who says, I'm going to get out there and start, I'm going to use this because this is what most of the guys get in trouble with. I'm going to start assembling AR-15s. I'm going to buy receivers. I'm going to buy barrels, and I'm going to put them together, and I'm going to make a ton of money. Well, you're considered a manufacturer when you do that. If you have not read the new frame and receiver rule in depth, then you're going to end up as an 07, where you're doing gunsmithing work and stuff that you do not think is manufacturing. You're going to end up a file of ATF, because you're required to put certain markings on your firearm if you're a licensed manufacturer. and there's a history there. There's a ruling that says you can adopt all these different markings, but it also says that you must put your name and your city and state on a firearm that you manufacture. So let's say I buy, I use a good friend of mine, Roger Crawl, R Guns, and I buy R Guns receivers, and I can adopt all of the information that's on his firearm. But I buy an upper assembly and trigger components and stocks and everything. I put it together. Now I'm considered a manufacturer. I have to report that on my AMFM, or the annual manufacturing reporting, and I have to mark it with my name and serial number. Or the new rule is, which is very beneficial, if it didn't have a serial number, I could put my new serial number that has a portion of my FFL in it with some other numerals. And that way that could identify the firearm. In that way, that's if it never had a serial number. But ATF wants you to adopt the serial numbers because they don't want dual serial numbers on it. And this is all about tracing firearms and to know exactly where that firearm traveled. So it traveled from Roger to my house, and then I sold it to Kathleen. Well, if I didn't have my information on it, they would only think that it traveled through my house. And a big portion of firearms prosecutions by ATF, a firearm has to move through interstate commerce. So ATF wants to know where that thing changed the border of a state or border of country. And having my name and information, Rogers in Illinois, what if I sold a gun back to somebody in Illinois and didn't put Rick Vasquez Firearms, Hubert, North Carolina? They couldn't charge the guy with possession of firearms that moved through interstate commerce. But since my information is there, then it would show up. Now they'll get that information through a trace eventually, but but that'll take time. So now we're into the point where I want to send my gun out to a machinist. I only have so much equipment and I send it to the machinist. Can I do that? Yes, you can. If the machinist is licensed as a manufacturer also, he can work on your slide, your barrel, your trigger, all these other components. But once he starts working on those receivers, he has to be licensed as a manufacturer. There are over 30 something Q&As that I put together, working hand in hand with ATF. Every time I wasn't sure, I would write in a letter to Firearms Industry Program Branch, and I did this for my clients. So when I give a class and prepare a Type 7 manufacturer, he has all this information. He knows exactly when a gun is considered manufacturing for ATF. Now, I'm going to back up just a short period to tell you how confusing this is. The definition of manufacturing, just of a manufacturer in the regulation guide, just says a person who manufactures firearms for pecuniary gain. That's one sentence. I make guns to make money. But then it doesn't tell you what ATF considers manufacturing. So if I buy receivers and assemble, I'm a manufacturer. If I buy a bolt action rifle and pull a barrel and put a new barrel and sell that gun, I'm a manufacturer. Now, if I do this stuff on behalf of a customer, I can do anything I want. Kathleen comes into me with a 1911 firearm, let's say a Colt Series 70. She said, I want you to replace the slide, barrel, trigger, grip screws, everything. I want you to start with a naked receiver. And when it comes out of your facility, I want it to have all brand new components. I'm not a manufacturer because I'm doing it on Kathleen's behalf. So all of these things are nuances that you need to know as a Type 7, what I call the small manufacturer. Because like I said, this doesn't affect the big guys because they're taking a chunk of steel, and till the time it gets blued and wrapped up and put in a box, they do all the functions in-house. But the Type 7, when he starts out especially, he's generally going to send this out to bluing. He's going to send it out to this company to get checkering done. All these different things are either gunsmithing or manufacturing, and the new rule has changed even more. So some of the things that were not considered manufacturing 2 months ago are now considered manufacturing under the new rule. So that's the aspects of manufacturing that is important for you to understand. And like I said, anybody that I work with, that's the type of information. I'll apologize for that. that they get so that I ensure that they continue making guns up until they're about 90 years old. Any questions on that?
You know what? I don't see any questions in the chat at this point. But I did want to ask you, Rick, I mean, I know we've covered kind of what is the consultant, when do you get one? What are the advantages of working with the consultant if you're a manufacturer? Obviously, we touched on when you need an attorney. If you could leave our listeners with just a couple of pieces of advice, given the shifting landscape in the firearms industry regarding working with a consultant or anything, what would some of those maybe 2 or 3 pieces of advice be?
Well, I was talking to a young man last night when I was on with Hank Strange, and he's done a lot of research, and I think the younger generation does a much better job of that than my generation did. So he's done a lot of research, but I explained to him that what he should do is hire me to walk him through all of the processes from the very beginning. If you're getting a new license, that is the best time to get a consultant because you start properly. You have electronic A&D, you have the consultant, you know what the regulations are. And what I do is I show people where to look also. I don't only tell you what to do, I give you the citation. So a good example is somebody asked me about offsite storage yesterday. So that's Title 27 478.50. And I've already written a position paper on that. So instead of giving him their citation, I just pulled up the position paper that told him the citation, everything from ATF, what he can do with offsite storage. And I sent it to him because he's a small manufacturer and is storing firearms at a different location. So if you start off from scratch, then you're going to be so much better off than some of these people that have been in business for 20 years and have been doing things wrong for a long time. The second time you should use a compliance expert is anytime in the early part of your business, anytime before you've gotten inspection. Now, most small businesses don't get inspected for 6, 10, 15 years, and all of a sudden they've gotten inspected. So if you've been following everything going on with ATF and Department of Justice, there should be something in the back of your head that said, I need to get my business checked out. I need to get everything that I'm doing looked at to make sure I'm above board. Because one of the things about revoking your license and prosecuting you is you have to have willful violation. So if you take all this extra effort to improve yourself, if you do have some violations or ATF finds older violations, then you have a defense there. You can say, guys, I knew I was messed up and I wanted to make sure that I got fixed. I brought this guy in, brought this young lady in, and we went through everything. And since June 13th, my business has been running this way, and it's going to continue to run this way. And so those are the times when you need a consultant. And you should there's sources where you can do annual consultancy. I do that with big manufacturers. With small business, I generally don't do that because you don't need to pay me a big chunk of money to have me on standby for a year. I just charge by the hour. But for these big companies, they need you on, especially importers. With all the things that are going on in the world today, an importer will generally have a consultant on standby all the time. And I'll give you one of the things that me and a former director of ATF worked on, and I won't tell you for who it was, but we worked on the UPS debacle when UPS came out with all that stuff. And on behalf of a very major client, we sat down with UPS and explained to him what firearms are, what parts are, what components are, and we fixed a lot of that nonsense before it really took into effect. So those are just a way a consultant can be utilized.
That's wonderful. And I'll just, I know in obviously our partnership and learning more about you, Rick, and what you do, I think what's great is you are very accessible to people of all sizes. and different needs, right? So you basically have kind of like this on-call help desk. You can call Rick with that one-off question, and you're only going to be charged for that time or that amount of work. If you're larger, as you said, right, Rick, people can put you on retainer. I know the services you offer, you're also willing to go on site for customers and check out their operations or help them write standard operating procedures for their employees. So you could have take that, the administrative burden of doing that, but people know that it's done correctly. And we appreciate that you're working with businesses of all sizes, all different types of needs. Bravo does the same thing with, all sorts of different point of sale packages at different prices to help meet those needs. So I don't see any questions in our Q&A or in our chat, but just a reminder to everybody, we are recording this. And so we'll be sending out an email with the recording. It'll also be on Bravo's website, and you'll see it on our YouTube channels. So you can always go back. But you have Rick's email, phone number, and you can check out more about him and the services that he and his team offer at his website there. But I just want to say thank you to everybody for joining us. We will be doing more compliance chats, webinars. So if you have any feedback about things that you would like us to focus on, you see that email address, hello@bravostoresystems.com, that goes to me. And Rick and I will put together any sort of topics that you feel are timely or something that you think would be kind of a hot topic for us. We're happy to meet that need. So Rick, thank you. Thank you for what you do for the firearms industry. We love being part of the 2A community with you. And thank you to everybody who took the time to join us today. Have a great
Thank you very much, Kathleen. Hope you guys have a good day.
Thanks, Rick. You too. We'll talk soon.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.